Today I'm going to be going over every Call of Duty game from COD 4 all the way up to Modern Warfare 2 in 2022, and I'll be selecting what I consider to be the most iconic map from each game. I'm leaving out Modern Warfare 3 because that game's barely a year old. Actually, it's less than that, so I shouldn't really include it. None of the maps are old enough to have any of that iconic status or to be memorable. And to be fair, you could say the same thing about the past 3 or 4 Call of Duty games. But you know what? I want a bit of a challenge, so I'm going to include some of the more recent ones, but not the most recent. I'm also not including the first 3 games just because I haven't really played those games that much. I think an honorable mention, I guess, would be Carrington. That map's iconic. But outside of that, I'm just focusing on the games that I have more expertise on, if you can say that. And now there's also criteria too, when it comes to what makes a map iconic. That can include its favorability. You know, if a map was a fan favorite, chances are it got played a lot and chances are people will remember it more. If a map also has a distinct setting, a location, I mean, that will also help too. And then another big factor is whether or not the map has been remade. So for example, maps like Shipment, Nuketown, they've been remastered so many times. So older audiences and newer fans have played it at some point, which again, I think helps with its memorability. I'm not going to be including remastered maps in all of these games. So for example, like I said with Nuketown, I'm not just going to be choosing Nuketown for every Black Ops game. I'm only sticking to the game that it's originally part of, which is Black Ops 1. So with all of that in mind, and disclaimer, some of the maps I'll be choosing are not going to be considered iconic, especially in the recent games, because either they don't have enough time in the oven, you know, to really cook and become memorable, but also because some of these games just don't have iconic maps. Let's be real with that. So let's begin. So we have to start things off with Call of Duty 4. And I mean, this was a game that has so many memorable maps, and I will bring up some honorable mentions because I think it's fair. You know, I could go with The Crash, with Vacant, Overgrown, Crossfire, Bog. I mean, this game is stacked. But there's an obvious choice, and I already mentioned it earlier, and it's Shipment. It's Shipment for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, the fact that it's probably still the smallest 6v6 map in Call of Duty history, I mean, that is something that's distinct, but people, I would say for the most part, love this map because of how many kills you can get. I know that nowadays it's more associated for weapon grinding and leveling and getting camos and all of that. You see that a lot nowadays, but it's also played a lot because people like getting their kills. They like seeing their kills maybe go up to the triple digits. So that's a factor too. And the fact that it's the most prolific map in COD history, I mean, we've seen this map, COD 4, Ghost, World War II, Modern Warfare 2019, Vanguard, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3. And a lot of times it has its own dedicated playlist because people like playing that map so much. So, you know, if this was 10 years ago, I might have gone with a map like Crash, just because it's only been really recently that we've seen Shipment a whole bunch of times. It's kind of become the Nuketown of Infinity Ward and Sledgehammer games. So, to me, it's a no-brainer. Now, World at War is pretty challenging, I have to say. There isn't an obvious choice. And look, World at War maybe doesn't have the same iconic catalog like COD 4 has, but I still feel like there's a few maps you can bring up. I was considering Macon, I was considering Courtyard, but it came down to 2, either Dome or Castle. And I was leaning towards Dome at some point, but then I realized, look, Dome was more of a fan favorite, at least from what I remember back in World at War. It was the small map of the game. But I feel like Castle has stood the test of time a bit more. Granted, both maps were remastered recently in Vanguard, but at the same time, I just feel like Castle has a more distinct look. And plus, you know, I don't know if this has an effect, but the fact that there's another map called Dome, which is probably more iconic, probably hurts the original Dome a bit more. I don't know, then maybe that's, maybe I'm wrong with that, but that's what I found over the years. So for me, I think Castle, you know, Castle is also a fan favorite. Castle was a pretty versatile map for many different play styles, and again, like I said, old school fans remember it, newer school fans have experienced it. Gotta go with that. Now, Modern Warfare 2 has so many iconic maps. I'm talking about, like, if I did a top 10, top 15 list, most iconic maps in COD history, I would say a good 5 of those placements would be from MW2. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Some honorable mentions, just to highlight that, would be Favela, Scrapyard, High Rise, and Terminal. I mean, talk about an iconic roster. But my choice is Rust. I mean, say what you want about the memes, but I mean, the memes about Rust kind of elevated to another level. The whole 1v1 me on Rust, bro, you know, that type of stuff. I mean, we've all experienced a good 1v1 on there, whether you won it or lost it, you know, I won't say, but Rust is, you know, again, just like with Shipment, a small map. It was a fan favorite, and it's been brought back a whole bunch of times, especially recently. I mean, we've seen it with Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare 2019. It made an appearance in Infinite Warfare. And just the look of the map is also iconic. I remember back in Advanced Warfare, there was some DLC map, and outside of that DLC map, there was like this formation of like crates and stuff, and people were like, "Oh shit, that's the same shape as what Rust looks like. The whole like whatever I don't know what you call the tower area. You know, it has the same shape." And people are like, "Oh, putting one to one together." That's how iconic Rust is. So that's what I'm going with. Black Ops 1 is an easy one. Probably the easiest choice so far. It's Nuketown. Do I really have to explain myself? You know, like, it can be considered the most iconic map in COD history. It's Nuketown. The look, the name of the map, the fact that it's been, not the fact that it's just been remastered, the fact that it's been in other modes too. We've seen it in Blackout, we saw it in Zombies multiple times. It's kind of a mascot for Treyarch, you know? Whenever there's a new Black Ops game, you know Nuketown's going to be part of it in some way, shape, or form. Not just in the multiplayer, but sometimes outside of that. An honorable mention I will say is Firing Range. I feel like in any other game, Firing Range would be iconic, but I mean, competition is steep. So, going with that. Modern Warfare 3 is also a pretty easy choice. Again, I referenced it earlier. I'm going with Dome. Dome has been remastered so many times. It was a fan favorite in MW3. It was the smallest map of the game. I think Hardhat kind of challenges it in that department, but people loved Dome. My favorite part of Dome back then was playing it on Infected. I just loved using the Juggernaut, Juggernaut versus Striker. I think that was the only map that had that. But anyways, Dome has made appearances in, I think, 3 of the last 5 Call of Duty games. I mean, newer fans are very familiar with it. It's also been brought back, I would say, like, unofficially in 2 other games. You're talking about Ghost, you're talking about Infinite Warfare, with Strike Zone and Genesis. Unofficial remasters, even though they have a lot of the same layouts. Not the same identical map. So Black Ops 2 has a lot of iconic maps, and honestly, there's a lot to consider, right? A lot of great maps. Standoff was a map that I would consider, but apparently that was a remake of an older Call of Duty game. We're talking pre-COD4 here, prehistoric times. Slums, another iconic map's been remade a whole bunch of times, but it came down between 2. Raid or Hijacked. Personally, I'm going with Hijacked. Maybe it's because I prefer Hijacked over Raid, but I feel like the fact that the map's smaller, the fact that the map, I think, has a bit more of a distinct setting. You know, people say, oh yeah, it's the map on the yacht or the map on the boat. I also think, like, visually, it's more stunning. The color palette is nice, you know, that sunset view. But the fact also that we've seen Hijacked a whole bunch of times throughout COD history. We've seen it in Black Ops 2, obviously. It was remade in Black Ops 3. It appeared in Black Ops 4 in Blackout. And then in Black Ops Cold War, again, it was remastered. So, a very prolific map at the end of the day. Raid deserves a lot of love too. Another iconic map, but I think Hijacked just puts it over the edge. Now, Call of Duty Ghosts has no iconic map. I'm saying this defiantly. No map in this game stands the test of time. The closest is Strike Zone, but I'm not including it for this list because I feel like it's just too similar to Dome, that it's kind of on the edge of being called a remaster in my opinion, even though Ghost does have a official Dome remake with Unearthed. But, you know, I'm not going to deal with that nonsense, so instead, I have to look at the rest of the maps in the game. And I mean, it's challenging. I mean, what, Warhawk, Octane, these aren't maps that have really stood the test of time. But the one map I still see people talk about, even to this day, I wouldn't consider iconic overall, but iconic for Ghosts, the most iconic map for Ghosts, that I would consider. And that map is Stonehaven. I'm not going with a fan favorite. Stonehaven was, I would say, quite the opposite. A lot of people didn't like this map because of how big it was. Sure, it had a cool setting, but it felt like it was a, you know, a bit of a catfish. I remember they first teased the map before the game launched, and people were like, oh my god, a medieval castle? That looks really cool. Sign me up, let me play that. And then the game came out. People who played on PS3 and 360, which was probably majority of people back then, didn't have access to ground war for some reason, so we were stuck playing 6v6 on this map. And talk about a slow game, slow matches that you would have. Obviously this map was popular for sniping, at least if you wanted to just camp on the other side of the map in hardscope, which, hey, if you want to do that, it's all fun and stuff. But overall, it just felt like the map didn't quite fit well in 6v6 Call of Duty, which is could be said about a lot of the other maps in COD Ghosts, but this map received a lot of criticism, a lot of the ire from the community. But that makes it memorable to some degree. So sometimes the most memorable isn't always going to be a fan favorite, and I might have a few more choices like that later on. Now, Advanced Warfare doesn't have any iconic maps also. None of the maps have ever been remastered, and you don't really hear too many people talk about these maps in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it makes sense. These maps are designed for advanced movement in mind. Even though it'd be really cool to see an advanced movement map be refurbished for boots on the ground, I don't know if we'll ever see that. Because, you know, so far it's been 10 years and we still haven't gotten an AW map remastered. But anyways, I have to choose what I consider most iconic from this game. I'm gonna go with Comeback, just because Comeback was the most popular. I think it had its own playlist. I think it was the only original map to have its own playlist back in the day. People liked the map because of its size. I don't think we'll ever see it remastered, but, you know, given its competition, I feel like it's the one that stands out the most. I was also considering Biolab, Riot. It just goes to show that Advanced Warfare doesn't really have... I think it has good maps, but doesn't have memorable maps. For BO3, again, another jetpack COD, another COD where none of its maps have ever been remade. It becomes tough, but I feel like BO3 was a more popular game, so the maps are a bit more memorable. The map I'm ultimately going to choose is Hunted. I was so close to choosing Combine. I mean, remember Combine 24/7? That was the regular playlist back in the day because you could vote on the same map over and over and over again back before lobbies would be spanned. You could do that in BO3, at least at the start of it. So people would just be playing that map over and over again because it was the small map. But to me, Hunted represents everything that makes BO3 BO3. It has the swing mechanics, the wall running, the elevation, verticality. It has it all. It was the map that was showcased in the beta for those reasons. It has this bright, colorful look to it. It was a fan favorite, maybe not to the level as Combine, but definitely up there. So personally, I think Hunted is the best choice. Now we have Infinite Warfare, and talk about a challenge. I mean, what am I supposed to choose, right? If I'm not going to choose Genesis, which I think would be an obvious answer, then what am I left with? Well, I'm going to go with Throwback. You know, I could have went with maybe Precinct or maybe Frontier, but I feel like Throwback is just like, has a more distinct setting, you know, that whole 1950s Americana vibe to it. People like the map. From what I can gather, I wasn't really playing this game a lot during its life cycle, only like after the fact, because I was like, I'm gonna skip that year, I'm gonna skip Infinite Warfare. So it's hard to really gauge, but that's what I can gather. You know, that's a map that people like playing, kind of hits some of the check marks of the criteria I set, so, you know, why not go with it? So next up is COD World War II. Again, we're going on a bit of a streak now, you know, games where I don't think any of the maps are that iconic. With World War II, I'm taking a similar approach to Ghosts, and I'm gonna go with the controversial map, the big map of the game, Gustav Cannon. I feel like people remember Gustav Cannon the most because, well, number one, if you liked sniping, again, this was a sniper's paradise, at least for me. Anytime I sniped on World War II, I was usually playing on this map. But it also has a very distinct look. You have that huge cannon in the middle, which really sticks out. It's a very weird design, especially when in COD World War II, and this era of COD, a lot of the maps are pretty cookie cutter, they're pretty formulaic. And the reason why I'm not going with any of the other World War II maps is that I just don't feel like the game itself that has any big enough fan favorites to really stand out and stand the test of time after all these years. I feel like Gustav Cannon, on the other hand, is a bit more memorable because, you know, it was very polarizing. There are people who love this map. I know people who love this map, adore it, and there are people who absolutely hate it, consider it the worst map of the game. Guess what? Keeps people talking about this map even after the fact. So that's my choice. Moving on, we have Black Ops 4. And to be honest, I'm probably going to go with the default option here, the map that I think is like quintessential 2018 Treyarch map design, and that's Contraband. I feel like Contraband was one of the fan favorites back then. It was one of the first maps showcased in BO4. It has a pretty rigid 3-lane style map design, which Treyarch, at least back then, was really known for, even to this day, but especially in the BO3, BO4 era. It also has emphasis on swimming mechanics, which Treyarch liked to push. And, you know, it's colorful, it's vibrant, it's what you expect from a Treyarch map. So, all things considered, I feel like Contraband is the rightful choice, I guess. Maybe Hacienda and Seaside deserve honorable mentions too, but I'm sticking with my guns, going with Contraband. So for Modern Warfare 2019, this one's interesting because I'm going with a post-launch map, believe it or not. All the maps I've chosen so far were launch maps, and for obvious reasons. Those are going to be the maps that people play the most. For Modern Warfare 2019, that's a bit different. This map released just a few weeks after the game came out, from what I remember. And I think you guys will probably have an idea what I'm going for here. I'm going with Shoot House. The fact that Shoot House has appeared in 3 games so far, it was remade in Modern Warfare 2, and it was also brought back in Modern Warfare 3, at least with some of the playlists. So it's appeared in 3 games, none of the other maps in the game have that. It's also part of the popular playlist, Shoot the Ship, if you remember. People played that all the time back in Modern Warfare 2019, because again, people want to grind for camos for their weapon leveling. So people played this map a lot. And I would say it's really the only map of the whole new era of COD that I would consider iconic, like, or memorable. Like, people will remember this map even after all these years later, because it either gets brought back or because it was a popular map. Again, you know, small map, 3-lane style design in a game where that wasn't really a popular design style. So that is what I'm going to go for. For Black Ops Cold War, I feel like the most iconic map from the game, or at least the most memorable, goes to Moscow. There are some other good maps in there, like Crossroads, like Satellite. I love Satellite. But I just feel like Moscow was played more. Like, I would just get into Moscow lobbies a whole bunch of times. And of course, like, that's like personal bias getting in the way of this. But just in general, I found the community at least liked this map. And the fact that it was in the beta, it was one of the first maps showcased, I think has kind of has like a bit of that like imprint on us, where it's like, okay, the first map that gets revealed, or some of the first few maps that get revealed, are going to be the ones that are remembered a bit more. That's what I usually find a lot. But anyways, yeah, I feel like Moscow, you know, is a well-liked map, has an interesting setting, going with that. Now with Vanguard, I feel like this choice is easy. It's Dot's House. It was the smallest map of the game. It was paired with Shipment as, you know, small map playlists that people would play to grind out their weapon leveling or their camos. So kind of in the same way as Shoot House, it was also brought back in Modern Warfare 3, so that I think helps its case. So yeah, overall, you know, it being a small map, it being part of these popular playlists because it's a small map, kind of boosts its memorability. Finally, the last game we're going to be going through is Modern Warfare 2. The map I'm going with is Mercado Las Almas. Excuse my Spanish if that wasn't that good, but I'm going with this map because it was pretty well liked. In a game that had some mediocre maps at launch, this one stood out, had a nice look to it. Small, medium-sized map, played well for different playstyles. I think it checks off all the boxes. So, to me, it was either between this or Farm 18. I just feel like this one has a bit more of a memorable look. Plus, it was brought over into Modern Warfare 3. So, I think that helps too. So, with all of that said, I've gone through all the games. If you agreed or disagreed with some of my choices, of course let me know. Feedback is appreciated, and I'll see you guys next time.